I'm Caitlin Dryden, and this is Slut. I'm Caitlin Dryden, and welcome to Slut, the show where I question who is and what makes a slut. Last summer, a friend invited me to her other friend's pilot premiere, and I knew right after I watched it, I wanted to talk about it on Slut. That pilot that I'm talking about is Almost Already Famous, written, directed, and starring Brooke Bundy, who is our guest today. Brooke is an actor who went to the Tisch School of Arts and started making short films during her time there. That's when her love for filmmaking was born. When she was only 23, she landed a role in Hunger Games and then Catching Fire. After that, she started a monthly show in New York called The Witching Hour, then found her way to Los Angeles to create another show called The LA Kings. We talk about all this later on. Throughout it all, Brooke has been interested in mixing the feminine with the grotesque. And I think Almost Already Famous is a great example of that exploration. Make sure to watch it on YouTube after this. The link is in the description to this episode. Sit back, relax, and remember to charge your vibrator for later. Brooke Bundy is up next. So, Brooke, you are an actress, director, comedian, and a dancer at the famous Jumbo's Clown Room.
Exactly.
And today we're speaking because you just released your pilot, Almost Already Famous, on YouTube. The pilot is about Agnes, a failed actress turned stripper who is the daughter of a famous Hollywood actress and lives in the shadow of her success. One day, she hears that Olivia Love, a hot lesbian director, is casting for a new film. It's about a lesbian vigilante biker gang that murders rapists. Agnes knows she's perfect for the role. Can you just tell us more about her?
Yeah, this all started as like a web series idea that was supposed to be really like producible and loose and casual. And then it, of course, ended up taking like 4 years. But nonetheless, we did it. And yeah, it's definitely an extension or a reflection of a version of me, of kind of like my worst impulses or like kind of like the parts of myself that I'm like most embarrassed of, but definitely also a creation. Like, I'm not a Nepo baby from Hollywood, but I thought it would be interesting if she had had all of the opportunities in the world, but have fucked it up because of her own instability and like mental illness, which I've definitely had like versions of like ways that I've sabotaged myself when I had some like bigger opportunities when I was younger and things have taken turns that I didn't expect. So it's like an
being
exaggeration.
on Hunger Games?
Yeah, like being in Hunger Games.
Octavia.
Yes, exactly.
I watched it last night. I watched both of them.
You saw my little cameo.
Hey, you had a few lines in there. It wasn't even that small.
I know. It was awesome. It was like a very fun experience. But I definitely like didn't know how to like sustain that at the time. And, you know, just like the reality of being an actor, it's like, doesn't mean you're going to get that every year for the rest of your life, you know?
No. Did you just assume that that was going to keep happening to you?
Not assume, because I knew how difficult it was, but I think like the hype of it was one thing, but like understanding how that hype translates to like work and like jobs is different. And that was like something, I think that's something you can only learn through experience. And like I was naive and green. Like I didn't know the industry very well. It was kind of like
how old were you then?
I was like 23.
Okay. Yeah, like it's really young.
Yeah, like I was fresh out of college. It was like maybe even younger when I got cast, but like the first professional audition I ever did, really.
I am also curious, did you pull on, there's another actress named Brooke Bundy who she was in, she's best known for a role as Elaine Parker in Nightmare on Elm Street. Were you pulling from that at all, like being a Nepo baby and just like maybe somebody thinking that that's somebody you know?
No, that was like a different chat. But like the whole like other Brooke Bundy thing kind of caused me to change my name for a little bit. So I went by Bruce for like 8 years because I was like, there's another Brooke Bundy, but like looking back, probably wasn't necessary. Could have done like an initial or whatever, a middle initial. But it's been a fun journey, and that there's a part in the pilot where like she changes her name from Andrea to Agnes to seem more like interesting. So that part was taken from like my real life of like feeling like I wanted to have this like Hollywood name or some kind of like armor maybe to help me in the industry or whatever, which is like maybe not necessary, but you kind of like, I don't know, just the interesting like kind of just circles we go in sometimes.
What do you think is your character's fatal flaw?
I think like having a mood disorder. And also just herself, like being her own worst enemy. There's a vulnerability to her of like really wanting a lot and wanting to be famous really bad, wanting to have success, truly having something to offer as an artist, but constantly also like sabotaging herself and shooting herself in the foot.
Do you feel like you've done that a lot?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, just like anybody else, I think, you know, you have victories and you have losses, you know, along the way. It's hard to say to what extent like things are just like part of your path and things are like blocking you or getting in your way. Like, I feel like we're all figuring that out as we go.
And especially like as creatives, you like have certain periods where you just have a lot more creative inspiration that's coming in your life and you feel really motivated. And also as a creative, you have to encounter like a lot of no's and a lot of failures. And it's pretty easy to like turn to substances or turn to partying and whatever you use to deal with those no's.
Oh yeah, for sure. And like, yeah, just distractions and like, and you know, the city, like LA, like to me, it's also an LA show, like an East LA.
Totally.
East Hollywood show about kind of like the land next to Hollywood, like the East Side, and also just like the people that are part of the industry or want to be, but then also try to like want to be cooler than the industry, and all of those dynamics of like who's actually has the power. And also just being these luxurious kind of self-indulgent people that like we are. I identify that way. Like I know I'm part of this like kind of we're these like coastal fucking elites that like are obsessed with, you know, going to dinner like
and getting $20 cocktails.
Yeah, like we fucking love it, myself included. So it just like kind of wanting to not satirize but just make fun of like the world that I'm definitely very much a part of. And also the sense of the world of like always wanting to get in. Like there's always a better party you could be at.
Yes.
There's always somebody who has like the job that you want.
Yeah. What made you want to tell that story?
It was just what occurred to me at the time that I thought of it. You know, again, I was like, let's just do this fast. And like I told two of my best friends and like collaborators on the project, my friend Jessica Calero, who shot it, and Jackie Calero, who produced it. They thought of this image of me playing this actress who's desperately trying to get a part in a movie and everyone's famous but her and her life, which was like kind of the joke. It's like, everyone's famous. Like, that's the reveal, you know, except for you. Like that feeling. And that was just the simple, like, original pitch. And we like went to the pool the next day and I pitched it to them and they were like, okay. And I was like, let's just do it in a really producible way. Like, obviously, you know, it all spirals out of control and ends up taking longer and being more expensive than you ever planned on originally. But it's been so fun. Like, I'm so in love with the product and like, I'm glad to finally share it with people. Cause that was the original idea, was like, let's just make something that we can make quickly and share it.
And you shot it in like a Curb Your Enthusiasm style where you had an outline, but there was like no specific script, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, okay. That was exactly what I was just directly ripping off. I was like, I want it to be structured like Curb. And I had heard how they outline scripts, and like I'd always worked with a more scripted thing like in my other short films. So I was like wanting to work in a more improvisational, looser way that I'd been kind of inspired by certain filmmakers in LA who worked more in that way and like got me to kind of loosen up. So yeah, it was my first experiment in doing something more more improvisational.
I want to watch this one scene where you are with your manager and it's midday and you're doing drugs in a living room.
Yes.
So let's roll that clip.
Scene.
This recording is dirty and it's stinking. Funky other petty review, so I was thinking about dropping this single on the chart, letting you know.
It's so crazy that you're here because I've been thinking about your carour. I knew when we were 17 years old that you were going to be an actor and that I was going to be your manager. And I sort of pictured us both like just en route to other places and like being able to travel around the world and see shit.
Like, honestly, at this point, I just want people to know me as something other than my mom's daughter.
Exactly. And I think they'll still probably know you for that, mostly, more than anything else. But it might be for something as well as that. I fucking love you. Like, it's everything that I've ever wanted us to be.
I love you too, and I want to be fucking
I want us to be working.
famous, and I want to be a fucking star.
Okay,
like,
so what do you see yourself
okay,
doing?
this is why I'm here. Olivia fucking Love. You know Olivia Love.
Mm-hmm. She's an actor.
She was an actress, but now she's like an art film
Musician.
director.
Art
She won fucking Cannes
last year.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And she just got greenlit to do this like movie about like these lesbian biker gang that like they were like vigilante rapists and they would like rape and kill men that had raped people, women.
This is what I picture you doing.
I know, and they really lived. This was like a historical thing when they got gunned down by the police and then they all got shot. Like, I just feel like I can't think of a better role or a more strategic. I mean, she just won Cannes. She's the only director out there that isn't full of shit and totally bought by the fucking studios.
Oh my God. Wait, how long have I been out?
I don't know. I just looked over and you.
I feel like I have been in that living room before.
If you've been in this town, you've probably been in that living room too. Like day, dusty, drug. Like, I feel like we really nailed what I wanted it to feel like. Dusty, but daytime, bright, but like dark. Like that dual quality that you experience so much in this town.
LA.
You know?
It's like such a paradox.
It's such a paradox. I love that contrast.
Yeah.
I love that scene so much too with brilliant Max Jenkins. He was one of the people that early on encouraged me with the project. Like, I kind of thought of that manager character early on, and it was one of the first things we shot. And I was like, thinking of doing this thing. He's like, do it. Yes. And I appreciate the encouragement.
Later on in the pilot, there's this scene where Agnes turns to a friend who has struck success with her career and asks her a favor. That friend is Kate Berlant. So you went to NYU, Tisch School of the Arts, and there you met Nigel, who's a good friend of yours and frequent collaborator. You met Sammy Birch and Alex Mechanic, who just wrote May December that just came out. And you also met John Early during this era and then later Kate Berlant. And you were the one who introduced John and Kate to each other.
Yeah, I think that the first time they worked together was on the set of The Gregs, which is like one of my short films. Interestingly enough, I knew Sammy, Kate, and Alex all before college, and then we all like knew each other before, and then like reconvened kind of in New York. It's
I
like
see.
A weird deep roots situation.
Yeah.
But yeah, I met John at NYU also, and then put them in this movie together, and that was like how they clicked. It was like
cool.
magic on set,
Yeah.
seeing them like fall in like artistic love, like at first sight.
What was The Gregs about?
It was it's kind of like a fantasia about the fake history of the SATs, that the SATs are written by all these like this cult of people named Gregs. Greg. Named Greg. It's psychotic. I thought I was like at the time literally working for a SAT tutoring company. And so you would do these like practice tests. We would go to Long Island on the weekend. We would time keep for like fake SATs basically.
Okay.
So you would just like sit there for 4 hours on like a Saturday and just like have time. So that was like when I wrote The Gregs. And I thought of that fucking story. I thought of it for that house and for those people. And then it just like built from there.
Was that like a friend's house?
Yeah, it's
did
my
you
friend-
record a few shorts there?
Yeah, my friend Nigel DeFries, who you mentioned, who's like,
Yeah.
him and Kira Pearson and I are like original collaborators, and our other friend Rob Malone were like the first 4 that went up there to make The Mud, which was like my first short film that we all like collaborated on. And Nigel has a house in Maine, or he had a family home in Maine, so his grandma like had a home there. So that was just like kind of the starting point. It was like he wrote the first movie like for that space, and then I wrote the Gregs for it. So that model of like just going somewhere with your friends and doing everything yourselves and like kind of making it like a camp experience, like that was how we first started making movies. And like I'm still obsessed with that way. Like you can't really do it anymore 'cause it's like also we're all like we would be too tired because we would just like wouldn't sleep and you know do everything. You know, it was just the 4 of us in our first one and then 7 of us when we made the Gregs. So I like have nostalgia for that like style of filmmaking and that way of doing it.
What did you learn through that process of being just kind of chaotic and diving into your work in this remote home?
That's how I learned to make movies. Our friend Rob Malone, who we made The Mud with, was a film student like at NYU with us and also a good friend. And so we were all actors. We had a background in acting and writing and making our own stuff, but I didn't know anything about filmmaking. And I didn't really, I mean, I knew how to edit because I had like learned in high school because of a project, but I don't know. I didn't really think of myself as a filmmaker up until then. And then I got obsessed with it. And it was like, it really works with my Virgo brain. You're like, wait, how do all the pieces come together? And
yeah, why do you like it so much?
I do like the technical aspects of it. Like, I think it engages like all the cylinders of my brain or whatever to be like, okay, I'm seeing this from the angle of like what the editor is going to see, what I'm seeing from the actor, like knowing that this technical thing needs to change. Like, I think it's when I'm at my most focused. I love the collaborative element of filmmaking, and I loved learning to make films like that. Because sometimes I think it can be a little like director. Everything is compartmentalized. Like there's one person who's at the top of the hierarchy, and we were kind of like more commie with it. We were like, we're all the director. And people would be like, what the fuck? Why are there 7 directors?
It's like there's a reason why there is one director.
I did learn that, and now I'm like comfortable being that one director.
So the communist approach didn't work.
Much like real communism, it proves to be a difficult system to practically implement, as great of an ideal as it can be.
Yeah. So it was like right around this time when you're making all these movies. I guess you're like 22, 23. And that's when, as we mentioned before, you got this kind of like big role all of a sudden with the Hunger Games. And that is like such a crazy thing to get that early on. And so you played Octavia, who's part
Fun
of
fact.
yeah.
Fun fact, the reason I'm in that movie is because of Sammy Birch, my friend who wrote May December.
Her mom, right?
Her mom, Jackie Birch, is a casting director. And Sammy, before finally getting her long overdue break as a screenwriter, she would do casting. So Sammy put me up for that role. It was like a dream come true, and it was so trippy working with that many like big famous people. It was definitely
also the
like
set is nuts.
Yeah, like that. Yeah, just being on a set that big out the gate was very cool. Like I still think about it all the time because I've worked on many scales of filmmaking, but it's cool to see something like a machine that big and how it runs and like how it works, and work with the best of the best, like the best makeup artists, the best hair and costume people, and just seeing people working at that level is divine, darling.
What did you learn from that experience and like what you wanted?
I mean, so much. I mean, I learned I wanted more of that. You know, I would also come to learn how hard that can be to get, you know. It was like a dream. It was very much a dream. And I knew it at the time because, you know, one of my acting teachers told me, and it's very true. She was like, your work will be looking for work and your vacation will be when you're acting. And that is true. I think I definitely also kind of got an anxiety of like wanting to like, because then once you're on one of those big sets, you're like the small fish in the big pond, and it can be intimidating. And I was a little like anxious for sure, and like green on that set, and like probably would be able to handle it differently now. But it was so thrilling. It was so thrilling. It was definitely like the years after that were like hard.
Why
like
were they
after
hard?
It died down.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, what's next? And it's like, you're an actor. Like, you might not work for 10 years, which is like essentially what happened.
Well, I guess, I mean, that's not entirely true because you were busy doing stuff in New York, weren't you? Like,
Yeah, I mean, I've always done my own shit.
Yeah.
But then you always have to have a day job to pay for it, which I have no problem doing. Love working. I'm a Virgo.
Yeah.
I love to work.
Yeah.
Work. But, hopefully one day the twain will meet.
I want to talk about this period of time in New York where you ran a monthly show called The Witching Hour. And I feel like it was really foundational of what was to come for you because you started to learn how to mix the erotic with the grotesque.
Yeah, The Witching Hour was a very special, oh my God, you really did deep research. It was a very special time and place. And a lot of great comedians came through there, like Jacqueline Novak and Connor O'Malley and people that I, still really love and admire. Definitely John, Kate. It was cool. It was coming off of the heels of Kate's show at Cake Shop. She had an iconic stand-up show there, which is where I first started doing stand-up and met a lot of these people. And so many big people would come through. It was Kumail Nanjiani and, Pete Holmes and Ali Wong and all these people, Aparna, everybody kind of would come through there. So it was a very blessed time and place. And it felt like the underground and the rising tide mixing. So it was on the heels of that and taking that energy, but putting my own sick twist on it, I guess. I always
What's your sick
to make
twist?
Things a little bit nightmarish, I guess. I'm a theater dork. I like experimental dance pieces and shit. So my friends and I Kira Pearson and my friend Julia Crockett, who's a movement teacher to this day in LA and just a lot of movement coaching, would come up with psycho, disjointed kind of abstract theater pieces. And we would mix that in with straight up stand up. And then we would do, Kira would do spells because it was witch themed. Cool. So we would do spells or I encouraged it to be really whatever, I want. It was underground literally in this basement of Jimmy's 43.
I was looking at the photos on Facebook.
Yeah, oh my God, yeah, it's all on Facebook.
I was we're really pulling it back because it's on Facebook.
Yeah, it's holy shit. I do have footage of it somewhere, but we never did good audio, so I never really released it. But that's how I met Alicia McDade, McDazzler.
A former Slut guest.
Yes, and Our Connection. And she plays Olivia Love in the pilot. And she's just such an inspiration to me. And that's how we met, through Diana Joy, aka Hyperbody. And she just was you should book Alicia on this show. And I think we had a lady, a women's show, and it was Diana Joy, her, Sarah Johnson, who's also a legend in the area. And Alicia did this mind-blowing performance about her husband leaving her and her reading all the texts or her leaving her husband and her reading all the texts that she had found on his phone. And then she opened her shirt and sang, and the singing was beautiful, and it was one of the most mind-blowing things I'd ever seen. And I was how long have you been working on that piece? And she's oh, I saw those texts earlier today. And I was holy shit, I thought you had been workshopping that for a year.
Yeah.
And it's that's Alicia. She's so goat. So anyways, it was just a hybrid of comedy and then also more experimental forms. And I've definitely been on that trajectory ever since and kind of have kept that going.
Hold on, sluts. Make sure you're subscribed to the show wherever you're listening. Also, make sure you're following @Slut Podcast and @Caitlin Dryden on Instagram and @SlutPod on TikTok. Subscribe to @Slut Podcast's YouTube channel, and if you watch it on there, you'll see the clip of Almost Already Famous that we heard earlier on, and then another fun surprise. Stream Almost Already Famous on YouTube. Search it by name or click the link in the description to this episode. Thank you for all the support. It warms my slutty heart. Okay, let's get back to Brooke. Okay, so you moved to LA in 2015. And not too long after, you start LA Kings, which is this psycho, slutty performance art show with Tina Stormberg. Can you just tell me what that was about?
Yeah, it's definitely a continuation of the Witching Hour energy. Tina Stormberg I know through Sammy Birch and then Tina's childhood friend Anna Nance. They had this store in LA called The Dog Show. It's like, if you know, you know, like shout out to the heads who know the dog show. It was this like iconic, like girly themed, like store/performance, like not performance. It was more of like an art installation in Echo Park.
Okay.
And like Tina's a visual artist. They both are. And she had sculpted this giant unicorn head that was on the front. So if you remember the unicorn head to all the old LA heads. But anyways, they were just like incredible, like creative forces in LA that I had admired from afar.
So you just had heard of them?
Well, we knew each other through Sammy
Okay,
Birch.
through Sam. Okay.
I basically was visiting LA and Tina was like, you should just move here and move in with me. And then I did. And she also, part of the pitch was she's like, I want to get into performance and I want to do something with us with brute strength. Because she's like an athlete girl and like a strong woman kind of, and I am too. So she had always been a painter and a visual artist and wanted to foray into performing. So that was kind of like part of the whole thing. I like moved here. We started doing that show. And it was like a beautiful coming together of like our worlds. And it was very life-changing for me. She knew a lot of those performers and artists from having been in LA for like a decade before and introduced me to so many like, you know, mind-expanding, beautiful artists. And that group eventually became Future Ladies of Wrestling, which was like a wrestling project we did for a couple of years. So it was a very cool chapter of like combining like physical performance and like that. We started doing the show at Cheetahs. That was kind of the first foray of like mixing like...
Cheetahs is a bikini bar in Silver Lake.
Yes. Kind of like akin to Jumbo's. Like it's not... It's like a little more artistic and like there's not nudity. And so it's a little more like of a mixed crowd. But I know that they had different, like a change in ownership. So it's not quite the same anymore. But it was like a beautiful physical space. And we were like playing with this line of like performance art and then like, you know, exhibitionism and eroticism and like burlesque and like, you know, just using the body in a, I don't know.
Could you walk us through like what one of those shows was like and what you were doing?
I could try. They were pretty psycho.
Go on.
Like it would be like like we would have a lot of music, so there would often be like an opening number with Tina and I. And one of our most iconic shows that almost got us kicked out of Cheetahs was like around the like first like Trump election, and everything was at a fucking fever pitch. It's like not like it's not now. It's just like when has the fever pitch died down since then? But it was like the beginning of kind of this like era of anger. And
I remember it well.
Yeah. And our friend Candy Payne, aka Mickey Yamashiro, I did this piece where she like pretended to be a hypnotist and she like had men come on stage and like tied them to chairs, and then she like ripped, you know, once they were tied up, she like ripped off her shirt and she's like, I'm not a hypnotherapist, I'm not a therapist, I'm a fucking wrestler, I'm Candy Payne, and I love wrestling and I hate men. And she started doing an I hate men chant in the club, and literally the owner like pulled Tina back. He's like, you guys gotta stop. Like, this is bad. Like, this is
like, I don't want to lose customers.
Strip club, yeah. And that's like I probably would have done now, but knowing what I know about strip clubs. But at the time, it was very raw. And our friend Jess Calero, who shot my pilot, cut her hair off on stage.
Why isn't
Iconic.
it something you would do now?
Oh, having worked at a club, I wouldn't ever start an I hate men chant at a club.
You just wouldn't?
No. The dancers were mad at us, and now I know why. You don't fuck with people's money.
No, that makes sense.
But we weren't coming from that place, you know. It was like this outpouring of like rage and like femme rage, and that's kind of what we were about. Like LA Kings was supposed to be like, you know, obviously we were ripping off the hockey team. It was like about kind of these contradictions of ways that you're not used to seeing femininity expressed, and like femininity through strength and like through brute force, and like some of the stuff that seems contradictory.
What do you think you learned about femininity through that?
I feel like I'm learning all the time. I've gone through so many different phases of it. That was something Tina and I really connected on. We really have come from a place of like being like tomboys and like kind of guys, girls in our youth, to coming around to like re-embracing the femininity and coming around to like, oh, actually maybe there's power in being hyper femme. Whereas like when we were younger, we experienced it as like, well, I don't want to be seen just for like my appearance or my sexuality, that I don't want to be part of that kind of problem around those things. I think that was like my young like feminist response. So always kind of working against that and pushing against that. It was like about making girly things cool again. You know, re-entering like that more femme-dominated space. And when I moved to LA, I feel like I also went on that journey of like re-embracing femininity in like a capital F like way and like kind of taking the femme thing and reframing it for ourselves. Whereas before I would have been like, I don't want to dress that certain way or present with these qualities that are looked down on by men.
That's so interesting because now you work at Jumbo's. And
it's a clean line to...
It's a clean line. And for those who don't know, Jumbo's Clown Room is a very famous bikini bar in Los Angeles and East LA. And it opened in 1970. Charles Bukowski drank there in the early days. David Lynch wrote much of the script of Blue Velvet in the mid-1980s there. Courtney Love danced at the bar in the early 90s. Anthony Bourdain has called it one of his favorite places in LA. And it was one of the first spots I ever went to when I first moved here. So... on the point of femininity, I know that you did some burlesque in New York. How did like doing all of these different shows and lead you to eventually just fully accepting that femininity and like going to Jumbo's?
Yeah, going to make money off of it.
Yeah.
It's been a crazy arc. Like when I was like 18 and I went to college, I could never have imagined myself wanting to show my body on stage.
Were you? So you were shy. So you were tomboy, but you were also shy.
Yeah. And I felt I didn't feel like great about my body as a kid. You know, I think
welcome to the club.
Does? Yeah, maybe like 5% of people were like, "It looks great to me." But there's that journey we all have to fucking go through where you're like, go from hate to love, hopefully. But then I had some really influential teachers who taught about the history of performance art, and I learned about Marina Abramovic and
love her.
Yeah, and like Carol Lee Schneeman and like Annie Sprinkle and all these like crazy bitches that are like showing their pussies in their work. And it was very arresting for me and challenging because I again was coming from that place of like highlighting or using your sexuality in any way as a woman is like bad because you're associating yourself with like this weakness or this kind of like...
Or it's like easy.
It feels easy.
Yeah.
It feels... Yeah, I don't know. I was coming from that place. And one of my teachers, like I remember one of my friends was like, look, there's pictures of her naked. Because she was doing like some, theater piece where she's like crouching nude, It's like black and white photos. It wasn't like anything pornographic. But, she was an East Side like experimental theater maker. So just like seeing some of that stuff kind of fall away where it's like, okay, it's not necessarily even sexual to show your body. I mean, I do think on some level it is human erotics. I don't know. It's a fascinating subject. So I could probably blab on and on, but that was kind of a turning point of like wanting to maybe go towards including my body in a different way in my work. And then I was curious about burlesque, and then I actually did take my first burlesque class doing this short film that Sammy Birch and Alex Mechanic made called Bev. That's amazing. Sammy had been working like as an intern for a burlesque troupe, and she was like, I think it would be cool if you did, because there was like a live performance element in it. So she signed me up for classes with Joe Boobs Weldon, who's like a New York legend, an ex-stripper, and she teaches you tassel twirling and like stuff that I still do. I'm like, I do know how to strip out of a sweatshirt thanks to Joe Boobs Weldon. And she's cool. She's like a scholar, and she, writes in a critical way about the history of like nudity and femininity and everything we're talking about. So I think being introduced to all those like complex perspectives and then starting to do burlesque, one of the, things was a student show. And I feel like when I first like actually like stripped down to pasties in front of a crowd, it like did like heal something for me. Like,
yeah,
once you're like on stage and people are like clapping for your body, you're like, you forget about the things that are wrong with it. And you're like, oh, like people are just stoked. Like,
Stoked to see some titties. Well, there's no nipple at Jumbo's, but.
And there's no nipple in burlesque like the way I would do it was always with pasties and stuff because there's like laws around what you can show. Like we would do the shows at the Slipper Room. But I don't know. There was just something there for me. And I think a lot of my burlesque work, it was all comic, like comedic. I think there's something interesting about using the female body, which is seen a certain way and is seen through the sexy vector, like using it humorously is still very like challenging for people, I think.
Yeah.
So I've always been fascinated with that.
When you first started working at Jumbo's, how did you accept the parts of your body that you hated when you went on stage? Like, did it just slip away in that instance?
No. And we still struggle with it like all the time. Like I'm always like, fuck, like if you're not making money, you're like, well, it's because I'm,
Yeah,
but
blaming it on something.
Yeah, but it's like, I don't know, it's weird. It's like at one time, like a disassociation or a detachment of like, whatever, like I don't care. Like it is what it is. Like you like it or you don't. And then sometimes it gets to you and you're like, if you feel insecure, it can feel worse if you feel like you're getting that reflected back to you. I don't know. It's weird. I go back and forth because it still is so vulnerable to show your body like every time on stage. But then if you...
Every time?
On some level, yeah. I think if you're like in a certain mood or you're like vulnerable to that feeling for whatever reason on a certain day, you can always kind of go there and be like, whoa, this is intense. Like everybody's looking at my body. But also, again, I've been a performer my whole life. I think my relationship to performance and like, exhibition or like showing my body is just unique. And it's just something I do.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just like where I'm at my journey right now. I think, there's something psychologically interesting about nudity on stage. It's like an extension of something that you're already trying to go for.
What do you think? Yeah. What's interesting about it for you?
I mean, I think it is like kind of like the ultimate challenge in some ways. Although, even though probably the scariest thing will always just being being emotionally vulnerable on stage. But I don't know. I think there's something freeing and challenging about, showing the body.
So do you feel like it's harder to be more emotionally vulnerable on stage rather than physically?
Yeah, I think so. In some ways, it's like a shortcut for it or something.
Yeah.
But I had a friend who was like naked in a play, and he kind of made me want to like be naked on stage because he was like, now I'm free. Like I'm walking down the street and I'm like, you've already seen it. And I do feel like I kind of passed through a portal of that kind at some point where it's just like, it is what it is. Like you're not like, well, what if everybody sees my ass? It's like, they have.
So it's an acceptance of that. And I want to go back to this grotesque versus the erotic. When I last saw you there, you did a performance to Fuck the Pain Away, and it was amazing. It was great. And I feel like that was like kind of a good example of how you combine the grotesque and the erotic there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's why I work there, is because there is that space for me to have all those parts of me like working on stage, and there's like space for complexity of like you can be your own personality, or oh god, the burbs. You can be your own personality, you can bring your own point of view to the stage there. people go there for that kind of like tension and like expression that's a little more complicated. So it's not just like sexy. It's like, I mean, I can't really help but be that. Like I can't hide that part of myself. Like even if I'm trying to be like demure or something, I think I still come off a certain way. People will be like, you're scary. And they're like, you're really strong, you know? And you're like, these parts of myself that I think obviously they did feel like antagonistic to femininity and feminists. Like throughout my childhood, definitely. I thought I was too like big and strong to ever be seen as like feminine.
Do you feel like you are more authentically yourself or more vulnerable in like your personal life after doing all this work, or do you feel closed off?
You know, it's probably a bit of both. Well, it's just different. I mean, that's an act to me. Like it's a character almost that I enter into when I'm at work. Duchess. Exactly. So it's like an energy, a character. It's not really me, but obviously parts of me are there and like show up. So I look at them as like very separate and compartmentalized. But, you know, obviously life's not really like that. Like things bleed over. And it's definitely probably made me a little more like closed off in some ways in my personal life, which
How
I'm trying to work on. I don't know.
You don't know?
No, I mean, maybe a little more like, you just like a little more, you have to defend yourself in certain ways against like the perceptions of others or the judgments of others. Because you literally have people being like, pss, 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 and you can like hear them sometimes be like, I don't like her body, you know?
That's crazy.
Yeah. So you kind of have to build up a thick skin. And like sometimes I wonder if it like works against me in certain ways. But there's things that I'm over now that I'm like, wow, like I do have a thicker skin. Like I was a lot more like led around by the people that didn't like me before this job. And now it's like if somebody doesn't like me, I just like, completely ignore them. You have to kind of face that regularly. Like you can tell in real time, like if people are into you or not, like based on how much money they give you, you know, it's like very fucking clear. So it's like, there's like a vaudevillian element to it for that, for me in that way, because you're just getting that really hardcore, like direct feedback with an audience. Like, you know, I've logged some hours at this point. So it's like really knowing how to feel an audience, like, immediately. When did you start working there? 6 years ago.
6 years ago. And weren't you private about it for a while?
Yeah.
Why were you?
Because I didn't want it to ruin my career. It's like you want to be seen a certain way. You want to be seen as an actress. And then there's just something funny about the cliche of like actress turned stripper, which is so funny that I made a show about it. So, you know, you don't want to, I don't know. I'm just like, there's still things I want with like my career that I even still am like, oh, have I like, you know, shot myself in the foot by being perceived a certain way. And I think some of that's like old school. Like I am coming from like, you know, maybe I'm a little closer to a boomer mentality of like, well, that's bad. But I do think those things also exist, you know, like there are things, you know, ways that people see you when they find out you have a certain, but you find out about this job, even though Jumbo's is such a specific place that has a specific history. And it's like, it's not like a club, but you still get slotted in a certain category by people.
Of course. I feel the same way with the show that I do. I sometimes like wonder if it was the right choice to call it Slut. I did it for like 4 specific reasons, and like to bring out like that titillating aspect and to challenge like people's ideas. But I do sometimes wonder if I have shot myself in the foot constantly.
Yeah, I think that's part of like being an artist in life, and also like carving out new territory or experimenting artistically, putting yourself out there. I mean, I think we're both doing fine, but it's easy to go there and kind of let some
when
of
things
those
aren't going well too, to blame your choices on that. I guess I'm curious, to bring it back to Almost Already Famous, how have you connected your struggle with femininity through that?
That's a good question. I mean, I think the show, like, it's going to be about a mother-daughter relationship actually at its core. I have this vision of like there being this journey for the character of like exploring that maternal wound and like pain and the feeling of not reflecting back what your mother wants to see and, you know, wanting to, but then like wanting to rebel and all those things, which I think are things I've really lived through. of like being in the world as a woman, feeling the pressure of like living up to your mother, but then also wanting to like do your own thing. And also, yeah, like what makes you a legitimate woman. I think the show is partially me processing that, like feeling like kind of a loser, feeling like I'm behind other people, you know, because you age through the world with like squares around you and stuff, and like no shade, no tea, no shade, but like it's like hard to compare yourself to like people who are like work at a company, you know what I mean?
You're like, why don't you go back to the bank?
Yeah. I think there's always like an inner voice that's like, grow up, go get back to the bank. But like, I've never been at the bank. I'm never going to the bank. I'm never like, there's no bank for me.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know. I'm like in my 30s now, so it's like being a woman is defined by like certain forms of stability and like commitment that I don't have like external markers of. So it's like exploring all that and like the identity of being in this culture without having those markers, or being somebody that's like kind of offensive to the mainstream, or your like life is like something that is unsightly to them, that they don't really want to see. Like, what is it like to be that fucking black sheep, like that freak that's like sore thumbing all over the place?
For the promotional photo shoot of Almost Already Famous, you mimicked like a bunch of Marilyn Monroe's photographs where she's working out. And I thought you could read this quote that you captioned it with.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Wow. You really did your research, girl. Caitlin coming through. Okay. Thank you for being so into this, because I was so into this project.
Good.
And
I
shot
was
the
totally
pictures
in it,
with Scarlett Capella, who's a dancer at Jumbo's and an amazing photographer as well. And that was the vision, was like copying those Marilyn Monroe pictures. I had the poster of her with the bench press above my bed as a teen, you know, like I loved that combination of like the strength and the beauty. And it's kind of like, a lot of my themes, like
what we've been talking about.
Everything we've been talking about. Yeah. The idea behind LA Kings. It's kind of the idea behind Almost Already Famous. So yeah, I love this quote. It is from Norman Mailer. Sorry, I know he's not like the most popular with feminists, but it's a damn good quote. Okay. Okay. I have respect for the way Joe DiMaggio gave Marilyn Monroe a small funeral. If she had never been a movie star, if she had been one of those small, attractive blondes who floats like spray over the Hollywood rocks, a little drink here, bit of a call girl there, bang, bang, bad marriage, nice pot, easy head, girlfriend, head shrinker, fuzz, dope, miscarriage, and lowering night. If she had been no more than that, just a misty little blonde who hurt no one too much and went down inch by inch, inevitably, like a cocker spaniel in a quick bog, well, then she would have ended in some small Hollywood parlor with 15 friends invited.
What does that quote mean to you?
Like my ex gave me this book. So it was like in that time, you know, where it was like, you want to read something really crazy. My ex was a butch lesbian. So it's like funny thinking about, it's like, it wasn't a straight guy, even though it sounds like such a straight guy thing to do. It's a straight man gift. It's like, have you read Mailer? But when it's like a butch, you're like, it's revolutionary. But when I first read this, it hurt me. Like it just, I was like, ow.
Why?
It just feels like he's hitting on something that feels very real to me, like being an actress, like lost over the like surf and the spray and the rocks of Hollywood, and feeling like, I don't know, it just feels like that feeling of being out of control of your success, like the mentality of being an actress, and like, especially knowing like how Marilyn herself and all the stars of that time were literally drugged, and like the Valley of the Dolls of it all. And just like, it's kind of like, if you win, it sucks. If you lose, it sucks. But there's nothing more painful than like getting close, but being so far away. Like there's something about Hollywood where it's like, when you're not winning, like you're such a fucking loser to people, or there's like a stink. And there's something extra heartbreaking about it, because a lot of us give up like normal lives for this, and like sacrifice things to just be considered, and like, it doesn't work out for everyone. And like that part is like so ouchy.
That's part of the deal.
It's part of the deal. And it's like, you just do think of it. Like, I've known these women, like I've known so many actresses, and I love actresses, but like we're kind of tragic, you know? It's like so easy to just be forgotten and slip away and just be. But I don't know. I mean, same thing happens to like housewives. I don't know. We all have our own like versions of this and different like identities. But I don't know. This quote just really spoke to me.
How would you want to be remembered?
I don't know, hopefully by making good movies and good comedy, leaving good shit behind. That's like how I most want to be remembered. And then by people in my actual life as like loving and good to them, hopefully.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on Slut. And I just want to close out with this one quote that your mentor, Vicky Hart, said to you. You're very charming and you're good at getting away with things. And one day you'll have a teacher who won't give a shit about that. And that will be very good for you.
Caitlin, you went deep, my friend. I love it.
So I hope you find that.
I've found a few. You know, the greatest teacher of them all is fucking life.
Yeah.
And she's a real bitch, but I love her. Thank you so much for having me, Caitlin.
Thank you for
this
being
has been
here.
such a pleasure. And thank you for your beautiful research and taking the time to talk to me. And Slut's on the rise.
Sluts stream Almost Already Famous on YouTube. Search it by name or click the link in the description to this episode. You can also follow Brooke on Instagram at Dr. Brooke Bundy and at Almost Already Famous. Subscribe to Slut wherever you're listening right now and rate it 5 stars. Also, make sure you're following at Slut Podcast and at Caitlin Dryden on Instagram and at SLT Pod on TikTok. Subscribe to at Slut Podcast's YouTube channel, and if you watch it on there, you will see the clip of Almost Already Famous and Fuck the Pain Away by Peaches live show. If you'd like to purchase a Slut sticker pack, go to slut-pod.com. That's slut-pod.com. Links to all these and more are in the description to this episode. Slut is created and hosted by me, Caitlin Dryden. Serena Lang edited this episode. Graphics are by Keisha Gargarello. Song is by me, but with help from Corinne Davis and Michael Mason. And thank you for getting slutty with me. I'll be back in a few weeks with a new episode. Bye, sluts.